In a quiet village nestled between misty mountains and winding rivers, life moved slowly, measured by the rising and setting of the sun. Houses of stone and thatch dotted the hillsides, smoke curling from chimneys as children ran barefoot along cobblestone paths. In this village lived two sisters, known to all for their striking resemblance and contrasting natures. The elder sister was beautiful and gentle, her laughter like wind chimes in spring, her hands quick to help any neighbor in need. The younger sister, though equally lovely, bore a restless heart and a sharp tongue. She was clever but envious, watching with longing and growing bitterness as admiration and love flowed toward her older sibling. Whispers of rivalry followed them like shadows, and even those who adored them sensed the tension that coiled tightly between the sisters. One fateful day, when jealousy had fermented into something dark and unrecognizable, the younger sister acted. They had been walking near the old village well, a stone structure that had stood for generations, its water rumored to possess both life and danger. Without warning, she shoved her elder sister, and the older girl tumbled into the darkness below. The splash was muffled, swallowed by the depths of the well, and for a moment, there was only silence. The younger sister's heart raced, a mixture of triumph and fear, as she stood over the rim, listening for any sign that her deed had gone unnoticed. Panic swept through the village when the elder sister did not return. Families gathered near the well, peering into its shadowed depths. Villagers called her name, their voices trembling with worry and mounting dread. The younger sister feigned grief, tears slipping down her cheeks, while secretly wondering if her actions had been witnessed by unseen eyes. Hours turned to days, and as search parties scoured the surrounding woods and forests, a sense of unease settled over the community. Something about the well felt wrong, even the birds avoided its vicinity, and the wind seemed to whisper warnings that went unheard by human ears. Then, as twilight descended and the village held its collective breath, a ripple appeared on the surface of the well's water. Slowly, impossibly, something began to rise. It was not her sister as they had known her. The figure that climbed out shimmered faintly, as though the moonlight had woven itself into her hair and skin. Her eyes, once warm and familiar, now glowed with an otherworldly light. She moved with an elegance and certainty that was both beautiful and terrifying, and a subtle aura of power radiated from her every step. Villagers stepped back in fear, their mouths dry, unable to speak as the figure emerged fully, dripping water yet unbound by the laws of mortal life. The returned sister did not speak immediately, but the air itself seemed charged with her presence. Crops nearby wilted slightly where she passed, and small animals ran or hid at her approach. Her powers were subtle but undeniable. Objects moved at her command, shadows stretched unnaturally, and a chilling wind accompanied her as she walked through the village. Those who had once felt safe in the routines of daily life found themselves anxious and uncertain. The younger sister, who had orchestrated the betrayal, was the first to notice that her sibling was no longer the same. Fear and guilt mingled in her heart as she watched the figure glance at her with a knowing, piercing stare that seemed to look beyond the flesh into the very soul. Tension grew in the village as the days passed. Some villagers swore they saw her appearing at windows at night, standing silently and watching. Others claimed to feel her presence in fields or along the forest paths. The younger sister's whispered apologies could not soothe the awakening of something far older than simple human emotion. Justice, it seemed, had taken form in the water, in the shadows, and in the girl who had risen from the well. Her powers, however subtle or overt, reminded all that betrayal could never escape retribution. Nature, village life, and even the air itself conspired to ensure that wrongs were remembered and accounted for. Generations later, the story of the sisters became legend. Parents told their children in hushed tones about the well where vengeance had risen, about the dangers of envy and the invincibility of virtue wronged. Travelers passing through the village were cautioned never to approach the old stone well at twilight, for the air there carried a memory of justice. The elder sister, mysterious and otherworldly, was said to still walk the boundaries of the village, ensuring that balance and fairness were preserved. Her tale, whispered and retold, endured as a timeless reminder: betrayal cannot escape justice, and sometimes the natural world itself will rise to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. In a village swallowed by fog and shadow, where the sun rarely penetrated the thick canopy of twisted trees surrounding it, two sisters lived together in a small, aging house. The village itself seemed to lean toward decay, with crooked cottages, broken fences, and the constant sound of wind whistling through empty streets. Among its residents, the sisters were both familiar and enigmatic. The elder was calm and gentle, her presence like a steady flame, while the younger burned with a restless envy that never fully slumbered. Every glance, every conversation, seemed to widen the invisible chasm between them. Villagers whispered that the younger sister's heart was darkened by jealousy, a shadow that grew with each passing day, and though none spoke it aloud, they feared what envy might one day provoke. One stormy night, when the sky rumbled and lightning split the heavens, the younger sister's envy reached its apex. She lured her elder sister to the old well at the edge of the forest, a structure long rumored to hold secrets darker than its depth. Rain-slicked stones glistened, and the wind carried with it a strange, mournful wail, as though the world itself warned of impending horror. Without hesitation, she shoved her sister into the well. The splash was sharp, final, and immediately swallowed by the storm. The younger sister stepped back, panting, but instead of relief, an icy dread clamped around her chest. She had expected triumph, but the darkness of that night hinted at consequences far beyond her imagining. In the hours that followed, strange phenomena began to manifest around the well. Water in the village's streams churned and turned dark without cause. Shadows elongated unnaturally along the walls of cottages, moving as though alive. People reported hearing soft, slithering noises beneath the ground, whispers that carried the elder sister's name but in tones that were not quite human. Dogs howled incessantly, and the air grew heavy, tinged with a metallic, bitter scent. Fear spread as villagers began to sense that something unnatural had emerged from the depths of the well, something that had returned changed and hungry for justice. When the sister finally emerged from the well, she was unmistakably the same in form, yet nothing about her was natural. Her movements were fluid and unearthly, her footsteps silent against stone and mud, her eyes gleaming with a cold light that pierced the hearts of all who met her gaze. Her voice, when she spoke, was layered with tones that did not belong solely to her, echoing with an eerie resonance that unsettled even the bravest villagers. Trees bent subtly when she passed, water rippled without wind, and the very air seemed to thicken, carrying a sense of judgment and inevitability. The villagers who encountered her soon found themselves haunted in ways that could not be explained: nightmares, fleeting shadows in doorways, and an almost tangible sensation of being watched. Panic gripped the village. People disappeared, vanishing into misty forests or abandoned houses, leaving only scattered belongings behind. Those who remained whispered that the returned sister was hunting her betrayer, and that no one who had witnessed the crime would remain untouched by the consequences. The younger sister, once emboldened by her act, found herself under relentless siege. Wherever she turned, strands of shadows seemed to follow her, carrying the accusing gaze of the sister she had betrayed. Sleep offered no respite. She awoke to the sensation of being choked by unseen hands and glimpsed reflections in mirrors that were not her own, mocking and vengeful. As days passed, the tension reached its climax. Driven by fear, the younger sister attempted to confront the well, perhaps seeking absolution or to reclaim her own survival. The returned sister met her there, emerging from shadow and water alike, her form flickering between human and something far more elemental, something shaped by the darkness of the well itself. Lightning cracked the sky, thunder rolled like a drum of fate, and the two sisters faced one another in a confrontation that blurred the lines between mortal and supernatural, human and otherworldly. Every gesture, every glance carried power. The storm, the well, and the surrounding forest seemed to lean in, watching as judgment unfolded. In the end, the village could not endure. Families fled in terror, cottages were abandoned, and crops rotted in fields left untended. The well remained, dark and silent, but anyone who approached it reported strange noises, glimpses of shadowy figures, and a lingering feeling of dread. The legend of the sisters became whispered lore, a story of envy, betrayal, and the unnatural justice that arose from it. Travelers avoided the village entirely, and over time, nature reclaimed the land, leaving only a haunted memory in the hearts of those who had once dared to live near it. The returned sister's presence persisted in myth, an eternal reminder that some betrayals cannot remain hidden, and that darkness, once awakened, does not easily rest. In the village, the bond between the two sisters had always been complicated, layered with both tenderness and tension. To outsiders, they seemed inseparable, sharing laughter, chores, and quiet conversations late into the evening. But beneath the surface, emotions twisted and tangled like the roots of the forest that edged the village. The elder sister embodied warmth and acceptance, drawing admiration and affection from neighbors, friends, and even strangers passing through. The younger sister, on the other hand, felt perpetually overshadowed, her efforts unnoticed, her voice drowned out by the brightness of her sibling. The rivalry was subtle at first, small resentments, moments of silent envy. But over the years, it fermented into something more corrosive, a stew of jealousy and unspoken anger that neither sister acknowledged openly. The act of pushing into the well, when it finally occurred, was not simply an act of physical violence. It was the externalization of long-suppressed rage, an eruption of internalized conflict made manifest. In this reading, the well becomes more than a hole in the ground. It is a metaphor for the subconscious mind, a repository for trauma, fear, and unresolved resentment. By shoving her sister into it, the younger sibling symbolically cast all of her guilt, envy, and suppressed anger into the depths of her own psyche, as if attempting to banish the object of her obsession from both the world and her consciousness. Yet, like all unresolved psychological tension, it did not vanish quietly. It festered, growing into something that demanded recognition. What returned from the well was not simply the elder sister, but the embodiment of the younger sister's own fears and projections. The other who emerged, strange, uncanny, unnervingly different, represented all the guilt, shame, and suppressed rage that the younger sister had refused to confront. Movements that seemed unnatural, a gaze that pierced beyond comprehension, and an aura of otherworldly presence were manifestations of the psyche externalized. The villagers' perceptions became unreliable. Some swore they saw familiar features, others felt only a shadow of recognition. These discrepancies illustrate the way trauma distorts reality. Witnesses cannot fully trust their senses when confronted by the projections of someone else's subconscious turmoil. As the younger sister grappled with this uncanny presence, her own fear and paranoia intensified. Every creak of floorboards, every whispered sound of the wind through trees, became laden with meaning. Sleep offered no comfort. Dreams became twisted reenactments of the incident, replayed with increasingly surreal and threatening details. She began to see threats where none existed, convinced that the returned sister, or perhaps the other, was stalking her, anticipating her every move. Her mind, previously capable of rationalizing envy as harmless, now struggled to separate guilt from hallucination, projection from reality. The line between self-inflicted psychological torment and tangible danger blurred until both seemed inseparable. As the story unfolded, the inner trauma of the younger sister began to manifest in external events within the village. Minor accidents, uncanny occurrences near the well, and inexplicable shifts in light and shadow all mirrored the disturbance within her mind. These events forced both her and the villagers to reckon with the consequences of suppressed emotions, revealing that trauma does not remain confined to the psyche but often spills outward, shaping perception, behavior, and community dynamics. The elder sister, or rather the other, acted as a catalyst for this reckoning, making visible what had long been denied or ignored. By the narrative's conclusion, the younger sister faces the necessity of confronting her hidden guilt. The psychological interpretation of the story suggests that healing cannot occur without acknowledgement. The well, the push, and the uncanny return are all symbolic stages in a journey toward self-awareness. The supernatural or uncanny elements serve to externalize what might otherwise remain internal and invisible, emphasizing the urgent need to confront unresolved emotions before they consume the mind. Ultimately, the tale becomes a meditation on the human psyche, on the ways jealousy, rivalry, and repression manifest, and on the necessity of facing one's own darkness. The horror is not merely in the act of pushing or the return of the sister, but in the reflection of one's inner turmoil made real. Confronting hidden guilt is the only path to equilibrium, and the story warns that attempts to suppress or ignore emotional complexity will inevitably resurface, demanding acknowledgement in forms both unsettling and unavoidable. In a village bound by rigid rules and long-held traditions, two sisters lived under the weight of expectations that extended far beyond their home. From the earliest age, they were taught to behave according to societal dictates, to be obedient, modest, and deferential to authority, whether that came from fathers, village elders, or even their peers. The elder sister, quietly independent and thoughtful, often resisted these pressures in subtle ways, reading forbidden texts, wandering into the forest, and questioning customs that seemed arbitrary or unfair. The younger sister, however, internalized much of the village's judgment, measuring herself against her sister's perceived transgressions and achievements, and gradually allowing envy and resentment to grow within her. Together, the sisters became symbols of female autonomy and resistance, albeit in contrasting ways, one embodying subtle defiance, the other constrained by internalized expectations and jealousy. The fateful moment came when the younger sister, driven by a combination of envy and indoctrinated ideas of propriety, pushed her elder sibling into the old village well. On the surface, it was an act of personal betrayal, but seen symbolically, it reflected a much broader societal pattern: the suppression of women who dared to step beyond prescribed roles. The well, dark and deep, became more than a pit of water. It was a symbolic womb, a threshold between oppression and empowerment, death and rebirth. By forcing her sister into it, the younger sibling unknowingly catalyzed a transformation that would reclaim what society had attempted to suppress: autonomy, strength, and the indomitable spirit of the wronged. When the elder sister emerged from the well, she was no longer merely a girl from the village. She carried with her an aura of empowerment that radiated in both subtle and undeniable ways. Her movements were assured, her presence commanding, and her eyes reflected a depth that seemed to pierce beyond superficial perception. The villagers could sense that something fundamental had shifted. The sister who had been subjugated, silenced, and nearly erased had returned with her power intact, if not amplified. Her very existence challenged the patriarchal structures that had confined her, serving as a living testament to the idea that attempts to diminish a woman's autonomy can never fully succeed. The younger sister, who had enacted the betrayal, faced both psychological and moral consequences. Fear, guilt, and recognition of her own limitations weighed heavily upon her. In a sense, she became a representation of societal complicity, the internalization of norms that perpetuate oppression, and the karmic justice that inevitably follows attempts to suppress others. The returned sister's silent power acted as a corrective force, reminding the village that wrongdoing against those who assert their independence cannot go unanswered, whether through human, social, or symbolic channels. The dynamic between the sisters also reflects the tension often seen in feminist discourse, female rivalry versus systemic oppression. While the younger sister's actions were personal, they were informed and amplified by societal expectations that pit women against one another, teaching envy and comparison rather than solidarity. The story, therefore, is not only a tale of revenge or transformation but also a parable about how patriarchal systems manipulate relationships between women, and how reclaiming power often requires confronting both external and internalized oppression. Connecting this narrative to modern feminist struggles, one can see echoes in countless movements worldwide. Women resisting unjust laws, cultural restrictions, or gender-based violence have faced similar attempts at suppression, whether literal or figurative. From public shaming to professional marginalization, the forces that attempt to push women into metaphorical wells remain present, yet time and again, resilience, solidarity, and reclaimed agency emerge to challenge and overturn these injustices. The elder sister, rising from the well transformed, embodies that resilience, a figure who cannot be silenced, erased, or controlled, and whose presence demands recognition and respect. The moral of the tale is clear: autonomy, dignity, and justice cannot be permanently silenced. Attempts to suppress or harm those who assert their independence may temporarily intimidate, but the inherent power of resilience ensures that oppression cannot endure indefinitely. The sister's story, retold across generations, becomes a symbol of empowerment for all who hear it, a reminder that even in the face of envy, betrayal, and systemic pressures, justice and agency can emerge victorious. The well, once a place of fear and attempted erasure, is transformed into a symbol of rebirth, strength, and the unassailable spirit of those who refuse to be diminished. In an ordinary village where cobblestone streets wound lazily between whitewashed cottages, and smoke curled gently from every chimney, two sisters lived lives that appeared ordinary in every sense. The elder sister was calm, diligent, and quietly observant, while the younger was spirited, restless, and prone to envy. To outsiders, they were simply two girls growing up together, sharing chores, laughter, and the small joys of rural life. Yet beneath the surface, there was a subtle, almost imperceptible magic woven into their existence, an energy that neither they nor the villagers fully understood. Some said the wind whispered differently when the elder sister walked by, or that the water in the well glimmered with strange reflections at night. Few took note, and fewer understood, but the magic was there, waiting. One afternoon, driven by a mixture of envy and impatience, the younger sister shoved the elder into the old village well. The splash was sudden, violent, and yet somehow muffled, as if the water absorbed not only sound but time itself. The well, ancient and silent for generations, responded in subtle, unsettling ways. Ripples spread in patterns that resembled arcane symbols, and the surface shimmered with colors that no one could name. A faint hum rose from its depths, just beneath the threshold of hearing, and small currents of air swirled along its rim as though the well itself were breathing. Villagers looked on, fearful yet fascinated, sensing that something extraordinary had begun. As twilight fell, something emerged from the well. It was not fully the elder sister, nor entirely a separate entity. Rather, it hovered on the threshold between the familiar and the uncanny. Her hair, damp and flowing, seemed to ripple like liquid silver, catching the dying light in impossible ways. Her eyes reflected a depth that no ordinary human gaze could hold, and her movements possessed a fluidity that defied natural law. Those who watched felt a shiver pass through their bones, as if the boundary between reality and imagination had thinned. Yet she spoke no words, offering only her presence, which carried a subtle, undeniable authority. In the days that followed, the village experienced events that defied explanation. Children awoke speaking in whispers that were not their own, livestock appeared restless, behaving as if sensing unseen forces, shadows stretched and curved unnaturally along the village walls. Dreams became vivid, often prophetic, filled with water, wells, and voices that echoed the elder sister's essence. The villagers, initially frightened, began to understand that these occurrences were not meant to harm them directly but to impart lessons about humility, respect, and the consequences of cruelty or neglect. The sister herself moved quietly through the village, never announcing her presence or revealing the full extent of her transformation. She did not need to, her subtle magic sufficed to exert influence. Crops flourished in fields where she lingered, while paths taken in anger or spite became overgrown or treacherous. Small accidents, minor inconveniences, and inexplicable coincidences reminded villagers that the world remembered every slight, every betrayal, even those that seemed trivial or hidden. The younger sister, now aware of the mysterious power she had provoked, felt a quiet unease settle in her chest. She could not deny the presence of the elder sister, nor could she control it, and she began to recognize the weight of envy and wrongdoing in ways she had never imagined. Despite these changes, the sister never fully explained her transformation. She offered no lectures or warnings, no explicit judgments or punishments beyond the subtle interventions that shaped daily life. Her silence was part of the lesson. The world, like the well, preserves memory in ways that are not always visible but always felt. The villagers learned to approach life with caution and reverence, aware that the ordinary was interlaced with the extraordinary, and that actions, even small ones, carried consequences beyond immediate perception. By the end, the tale of the well and the transformed sister became a story whispered among villagers, growing with retellings into legend. It reminded all who heard it that the world is alive with subtle magic, that wrongs are never entirely forgotten, and that the most ordinary-seeming lives may conceal forces beyond comprehension. In their quiet village, the sister's story endured as a reminder that justice, memory, and power can take forms both gentle and terrifying, and that even the smallest acts of betrayal are woven into the invisible currents of existence, shaping reality in mysterious and unforgettable ways. In a kingdom ruled by a lineage known for cruelty and ambition, a noble household sat at the heart of a sprawling castle, its towers scraping the sky and its walls thick with stone. Within this household lived two sisters, alike in beauty but divided by temperament and desire. The elder sister embodied grace, wisdom, and subtle defiance, admired not only for her poise but for a quiet strength that challenged the arbitrary decrees of their family. The younger sister, less recognized and perpetually overshadowed, nursed a bitter envy that grew into a dangerous ambition. She watched the attention, respect, and influence lavished upon her sister and seethed with the desire to claim what she felt was owed to her by birthright and cunning. One fateful evening, as a storm gathered over the castle, the younger sister lured the elder to the ancient well that had long stood in the courtyard. It was a structure steeped in history and superstition, said to connect the mortal realm to powers beyond human understanding. With a sudden shove, the younger sister cast her elder into the dark abyss. The splash echoed like thunder, mingling with the storm, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. Those who witnessed it recoiled, believing the act final, while the younger sister stood panting, heart racing, caught between triumph and fear. She imagined the throne, the respect, the unchallenged dominance she would soon inherit, yet even in that moment, an uneasy chill crept into her thoughts, whispering of consequences she could not foresee. The well, ancient and alive with mystical energy, transformed what it received. In its depths, the elder sister did not perish. Instead, she underwent a dark, mystical metamorphosis. Her body and spirit absorbed the storm, the water, and the arcane forces lurking in the castle's foundations. When she emerged, she was no longer merely human. Her hair, long and black as midnight, shimmered with a strange energy, her eyes glowed like embers in shadow, and her presence exuded power and inevitability. The courtyard trembled under her first steps, and the servants and guards who witnessed her rising fell to their knees in awe and terror. It was clear that the sister who had been cast aside had returned not only alive but transformed into a force that could not be denied. With patience and precision, the returned sister began her hunt. The younger sister, who had once delighted in her triumph, found herself ensnared by forces she could neither see nor comprehend. Hallways became mazes of shifting shadows, torches flickered with unnatural wind, and cold whispers filled the ears of those who had aided or remained silent. The elder sister's revenge was subtle at first, testing and undermining, then grew in intensity, leaving soldiers entangled, nobles frightened, and the castle itself trembling under the weight of supernatural justice. Each step of her pursuit carried a lesson, demonstrating that cruelty and ambition built upon betrayal are fragile and easily undone by a will greater than mere mortal schemes. As the tension escalated, a climactic confrontation between the sisters unfolded within the castle walls, near the very well that had catalyzed the transformation. Lightning flashed through the storm-ravaged courtyard, illuminating the sisters in stark relief, one consumed by fear and guilt, the other a living embodiment of dark power and judgment. Magic and morality intertwined as the elder sister unleashed her abilities, bending shadows, summoning winds, and drawing upon the energies of the storm and the well itself. The younger sister fought with desperation, yet every act of aggression was countered not only by supernatural force but by the inevitability of reckoning. It was a battle in which both blood and conscience were tested, where ambition collided with the righteousness of vindication, and where the very foundations of the kingdom seemed to respond to the moral weight of the encounter. In the end, the elder sister rose victorious, not merely as a survivor but as a shadow queen, a figure of power whose presence transcended ordinary rule. Her brother, her rivals, and even the castle itself became subjects to a justice that was both fearsome and instructive. The younger sister, humbled and broken, became a cautionary figure, her envy and ambition serving as a warning to all who might follow the same path. The legend of the sisters endured long after the storm passed and the castle returned to uneasy peace. Stories of the Shadow Queen and her rise from the well inspired both rebellion and reverence. Peasants and nobles alike whispered of her name, teaching that cruelty, envy, and betrayal invite consequences that are impossible to evade. Her tale became a reminder that power, when intertwined with morality and justice, can transform the wronged into an unstoppable force, and that the legacies of ambition and envy are often written not in blood alone, but in the shadows of those they wronged. In a village governed by strict hierarchies and centuries-old customs, life was defined by duty, lineage, and obedience. The houses were built close together, their timbered walls darkened by years of smoke, and the streets were narrow, worn by countless footsteps tracing the same paths of labor and ritual. Within this society, two sisters lived, their lives shaped not only by family bonds but by the rigid structures that dictated rank, inheritance, and social standing. The elder sister, patient and wise, followed the rules yet found ways to question and navigate them with quiet intelligence. The younger sister, restless and ambitious, seethed at the attention her elder received from neighbors, relatives, and even local authorities. She coveted what her sister possessed, be it recognition, inheritance, or favor, and she allowed envy to grow unchecked, feeding on both personal desire and the expectations imposed by the social system. The act of betrayal occurred at the old village well, a structure that had witnessed countless generations and countless decisions shaped by hierarchy and law. One evening, driven by jealousy and the lure of personal gain, the younger sister pushed her elder into the deep, dark water. The well, centuries old and lined with stone, seemed to absorb not only the elder sister's form but the weight of societal pressures, the envy simmering between the two siblings, and the expectations that had trapped them both. The fall was sudden, but the ripples it sent through the village were far-reaching, symbolizing how acts of betrayal within oppressive systems reverberate beyond immediate participants. The villagers, who had long observed the sisters through the lens of tradition, gossip, and superstition, reacted with a mixture of horror, curiosity, and disbelief, reflecting the ways in which communities both witness and enable injustice. In the days that followed, the elder sister returned from the well, transformed. She bore an aura of authority that went beyond mere human presence, as if the well had distilled her sense of justice and amplified it. Her appearance was striking, her hair damp and dark, eyes steady and unnervingly sharp, movements deliberate and commanding. To the villagers, it was clear that she had become something more than a human being, an embodiment of moral reckoning shaped by the injustice she had suffered. The transformation served as a reminder that systems of oppression and betrayal cannot erase accountability. Those who attempt to wrong others may find themselves confronted not only by human judgment but by forces that exist beyond ordinary comprehension. The story mirrored many historical events, past and present, that the village had long held in memory or legend. Families had feuded over inheritances for generations, towns had punished alleged witches with public shaming, and political purges had eradicated rivals under the guise of law and morality. In each case, the structures meant to maintain order often created cycles of vengeance and retribution. The elder sister's return from the well symbolized these cycles, demonstrating that injustice, once enacted, tends to circle back to those who perpetuate it. Her presence, quiet yet undeniable, forced villagers to confront the consequences of their complicity, whether through silence, gossip, or active participation in the betrayal. The younger sister, who had enacted the betrayal, became a figure marked by fear and guilt. Every glance, every whispered rumor, reminded her that her actions had not gone unnoticed or unpunished. The moral clarity embodied by the returned sister served as a counterpoint to the younger sister's ambition and envy, illustrating that betrayal, when executed within the framework of oppressive systems, may yield temporary advantage but rarely escapes the inevitable reckoning. Over time, the tale of the sisters became a lesson in both local and broader human history. It reminded villagers that acts of envy and betrayal are not isolated incidents but part of patterns repeated across generations and societies. By framing the narrative within the structures of a historical period, whether medieval, feudal, or colonial, the story emphasized the persistent relevance of justice, morality, and accountability. In the end, the village preserved the memory of the well and the sisters as a cautionary legend, a reminder that betrayal cannot erase conscience, and that systems of power, however entrenched, are always vulnerable to the return of moral reckoning. Thus, the story endured, bridging the personal and the historical, illustrating that injustice, whether enacted in private or sanctioned by societal pressures, always finds its way back. The elder sister became a symbol, not only of vengeance but of the enduring principle that wrongdoing, especially when supported by complicity in oppressive systems, leaves traces that cannot be silenced or ignored. In a village perpetually shrouded in fog and shadow, where the sun rarely pierced the thick veil of mist, life carried a sense of unease that never fully lifted. The houses leaned precariously, their wooden beams warped and weathered, and the streets were narrow, slick with perpetual damp. The villagers moved with caution, as though the air itself could shift suddenly, carrying danger or unseen eyes. In this place lived two sisters, bound by blood but divided by temperament. The elder was measured, quiet, and thoughtful, while the younger was restless, sharp-tongued, and consumed by envy. Their relationship was tense, a careful dance of smiles and hidden resentment, with every minor slight building invisible walls between them. The fateful act occurred during a storm-laden night, when the full moon struggled behind rolling clouds, casting distorted shadows across the village. The younger sister, driven by jealousy and ambition, led her elder to the ancient stone well at the village's edge. Legends whispered that the well had long been a place of ritual, a point where the veil between worlds thinned. Without hesitation, she shoved her sister into the cold, dark depths. The splash echoed like a gunshot, followed by silence so profound it seemed unnatural. Villagers nearby rushed to the edge, peering into the depths, but the darkness swallowed everything. The elder sister was presumed dead, and the younger stood trembling, caught between exhilaration and a creeping sense of unease that she could not name. In the days that followed, subtle, unnerving signs emerged. Shadows appeared where none should have been, twisting and stretching unnaturally along walls and alleyways. Strange noises echoed at night, footsteps on cobblestones where no one walked there, whispers that carried a tone vaguely familiar yet impossible to identify. Livestock became restless, and even the wind seemed to carry a low, mournful moan. Villagers began to murmur among themselves, uneasy with the sense that the well had not yielded death, but something far more insidious. Then she returned. The elder sister emerged from the well, but she was not the same. Her movements were uncanny, fluid yet angular, as if she were simultaneously a person and something other. Her voice carried an eerie resonance, layered with echoes that no human throat could produce. Shadows clung to her as though drawn by invisible threads, curling and twisting in ways that defied natural light. The villagers recoiled, recognizing her face yet sensing immediately that this was no longer the sister they had known. Fear rippled through the community, mingled with fascination, for the transformation was subtle, psychological, and profoundly unsettling. The younger sister, who had orchestrated the push, found herself unraveling. Sleep brought no rest, only dreams in which her sister's face appeared in twisted forms, whispering accusations she could neither answer nor deny. Hallucinations plagued her waking hours. Mirrors reflected not herself but the mocking, uncanny gaze of the returned sister. Every creak in the floorboards, every gust of wind, seemed charged with intention. Paranoia consumed her, the boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred, leaving her to question whether the supernatural presence was real or a projection of her guilt. Yet deep down, she feared both explanations. The tension reached its apex near the well, on a night when the storm returned, mirroring the night of the betrayal. Lightning split the sky, casting harsh, flickering light on the sisters. The elder's movements were deliberate, predatory yet restrained, while the younger's desperation and terror were palpable. The confrontation was not merely physical but psychological, each gesture and gaze carrying centuries of moral weight, envy, and judgment. The air was thick with dread, the well itself seeming to pulse with the echo of past sins and present reckoning. Afterwards, the village was left in ruin. Survivors fled, abandoning homes and hearths. The few who remained spoke in hushed tones of shadows moving independently, of whispers on windless nights, and of a presence that could not be seen fully but was always felt. The well remained, silent yet watchful, a locus of fear and memory. The returned sister's nature was never fully understood. She existed at the edge of perception, neither wholly human nor fully other, a lingering terror that haunted the foggy streets and darkened cottages. The story endured, whispered through generations as a warning and a mystery. The villagers learned to respect the boundaries between the living and the uncanny, to fear the consequences of envy and betrayal, and to recognize that some wrongs, once committed, cannot be erased. The elder sister, or the other she had become, remained a presence in the village's memory, a reminder that horror often hides in the ordinary, and that the world carries the weight of justice in ways subtle, psychological, and impossible to forget. Across cultures and throughout history, stories of sibling betrayal have appeared in countless forms, each adapted to the values, fears, and imaginations of the societies that told them. The tale of one sister pushing another into a well, only for something strange and transformative to emerge, is a narrative that resonates far beyond the boundaries of any single village or kingdom. It is a universal story, one that reflects the complexities of human relationships, the corrosive power of jealousy, and the inevitability of moral reckoning. From Europe to Asia, Africa to the Americas, myths and folktales repeatedly explore the tension between kinship and rivalry, illustrating that betrayal is both intimate and archetypal, a theme that transcends culture and geography. In many cultures, wells, rivers, and other bodies of water serve as more than mere sources of sustenance. They are liminal spaces, thresholds between the known and the unknown, life and death, reality and the supernatural. In European folklore, wells often function as portals through which spirits, witches, or transformed beings emerge, carrying lessons or retribution. In Japan, stories of submerged women, spirits, or creatures rising from rivers and ponds speak to both fear and respect for natural forces, as well as the consequences of moral transgression. African traditions likewise contain tales of water spirits, ancestral intervention, and transformation, where betrayal within a family can invoke the wrath of spirits who enforce balance and justice. Across these global examples, water becomes a medium through which human actions, particularly acts of envy or betrayal, are tested and judged, demonstrating a shared symbolic logic. The environment itself can participate in moral reckoning. Supernatural retribution appears repeatedly in these narratives. In Asia, one finds stories where siblings wronged by jealousy are returned with powers that enforce karmic justice. In Africa, ancestral spirits or deities intervene when familial bonds are violated. In Europe, witches and revenants often emerge from wells, forests, or graves to punish those who transgress social and moral norms. While the specific imagery and rules differ, the underlying message is consistent. Betrayal cannot remain unpunished, and wrongdoing carries consequences that extend beyond ordinary human capacity for enforcement. This universality underscores the way human societies have used supernatural elements to reinforce ethical and communal values. Gendered dynamics are central to many of these tales. Sisters, often depicted as rivals, represent both the potential for solidarity and the vulnerability to jealousy amplified by societal pressures. Envy, competition, and the desire for attention, inheritance, or social standing become more than personal failings. They are embedded in a framework of expectations imposed by culture and family. Tales of magical punishment, such as the transformative consequences of falling into a well, often reflect anxieties about female power, agency, and autonomy, showing that revenge or empowerment may manifest in ways that transcend conventional morality. This repetition across continents and eras highlights a persistent fascination with the interplay between gender, jealousy, and the supernatural. Moral lessons are embedded in each version of these narratives. They warn against envy, illustrate the inevitability of justice, and underscore the importance of maintaining family bonds. Yet they also explore the nuances of morality. The betrayer may be punished harshly, but the act of retaliation often carries ambiguity, suggesting that justice is neither simple nor singular. Across cultures, these tales teach that human actions reverberate through both social and supernatural realms, and that attempts to harm others, particularly through deception or violence, ultimately invite consequences. Magical punishment often mirrors psychological consequence. The returned sister, transformed by the well or water, embodies both a supernatural and symbolic manifestation of trauma, guilt, and retribution. This duality appears in myths globally, where magical intervention externalizes what might otherwise remain internal, a projection of conscience, fear, or social judgment. Villages, families, or witnesses experience disruption, fear, and revelation, reflecting the enduring human fascination with how intangible forces, moral or mystical, can reshape lived reality. The persistence of these stories across time and space attests to a deep, human fascination with betrayal and revenge. Whether told around hearths, in royal courts, or in marketplaces, these narratives resonate because they confront universal anxieties: the fragility of trust, the consequences of envy, and the capacity for the wrong to reclaim power, sometimes through extraordinary means. Water, wells, hair, and other recurring symbols serve as vessels of identity and justice, reminding audiences that human relationships are fraught with moral weight, and that the natural and supernatural worlds often collaborate to ensure accountability. Ultimately, the folktale of a sister cast into a well, and the strange entity that emerges, is not merely a localized story but part of a vast tapestry of global narrative traditions. It reflects universal concerns with identity, morality, and the consequences of betrayal, and it demonstrates how societies across the world have employed symbolism, transformation, and supernatural intervention to explore these themes. The recurring motifs of hair, water, and wells carry profound meaning, linking human action with cosmic or moral order, and reminding all who hear the tale that justice, memory, and retribution are eternal, fluid, and inescapable.